Hello and welcome to the Alpha Software Demo and Q&A webcast. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Product Management here at Alpha Software. And today we are going to be doing a follow-up on what we talked about last week. Last week we were talking about connecting up parent lists and parent-child data, and we used an invoice as an example. And while we did come up with a working example, which kind of looked like this, it was really just a proof of concept. Today, what I wanted to show you was something I get asked about a lot, and that is how do I style things so that they look good? So in fact, today's webinar will in fact be on styling. Before I go much further, excellent. I was wondering if you can hear me and you can see my slides. Someone's ahead of me this time. Thank you very much. Looks like my AV check is going to plan. All right. So, like I said, we built out a sample invoice system and we used a couple of list controls within a UX. So today we're going to be talking about styling UXs and styling list controls within UXs. When we put this together, we basically had two list controls. And if you recall, a list can have what's called a detail view to it. So this top list, excuse me, is the invoice header, and it only contains the fields that are relevant to that particular order. And you could click this button and move from field to field, and you could see a change up here. And then down here are the items, the things that were purchased actually in the invoice. So yeah, it works, but it doesn't really look that good. So when I try to get inspired, I'd like to go and take a look at a website called Dribbble, DRIBBBLE.com. Yeah, there's an extra B in there. And I'd like to see what other people have done. And I saw this one, I thought, oh, this one's pretty nice. I would like to make mine kind of look more like this. So instead of this, I want it to look a little bit more like this. So what I did was I grabbed a screenshot of it. Now, if I was going to use this and use all of the CSS and stuff, I could have purchased that from Dribbble.com, and that could have given me a head start. But here I was just looking for inspiration. So what I did was I used that as inspiration, and I ended up creating another version of our UX that now looks like this. You can see it is styled differently. Let's take a look at the one that we got here from Dribbble first, though. You'll notice that it's got some shading here around in the back. And then this main part is like in a white box. And then you've got the name of the company is up here. You've got the dates and the totals and things like that. And they are also in different fonts, different weights. Here, which is our list control that shows the items, you'll see it sort of has this light blue background, again, different fonts and stuff. The other thing they've done, which I kind of liked, was that they numbered each of the invoice item rows over here on the left. They used a different color here for the product and so on. And they've done some alternate shading as well. So I'm going to show you today how you can do these sorts of changes into a UX. And we're going to be covering lots of different little areas. And this is great if you haven't styled a UX in a while, or if you've never styled a UX. I think you're going to find today's session to be helpful. So let's take a look. So the first thing I did, or what I would used to do in the old days, is I would use something like GIMP or Photoshop, and I would take a picture of what I was trying to emulate, and I might use the eyedropper tool to go and pull out the different colors, like what color is this blue background, and what color is being used for this green button, so that I can get its hex values, so that I can later use them in Alpha Anywhere to style the corresponding elements. Instead, I went to ChatGPT. I said, look, I'm going to upload an image of an invoice application. I'd like you to recreate this invoice in Alpha Anywhere. Can you help me identify the colors, fonts, anything else that might be useful? And so that is actually what it did. It did not take long. It came back and said, oh yeah, header background is this light gray. The section headers, it's white, but it has a text label that's about this color here. And it just went on and actually dissected the page for me. In fact, I could go back and ask follow-up questions and say, hey, can you give me the CSS for the top heading, for example? And it'll give me the inline CSS that I can use in my application. So enough PowerPoint. Let's go ahead and take a look at the live application, and I'm going to show you what I did and how I put it together. All right. So let's take a look up here. This is a working preview of, actually start with last week's. This is last week's working preview. If you recall, you can scroll from item to item, and then you'd have the items listed down here. And this is the new version over here. So let's see how we put this together. So starting up at the very top, if you recall, we decided that it would look nice to have a background color. In fact, maybe I should switch between this and, let me switch between this and the PowerPoint slide. So if we switch back and forth there, it'll be easier to see. So here we've got like a background color that we wanted to use around everything here. So to do that, I put when I was designing this, and I used a panel card. The panel card was used to put all of the items together. And in the panel card, I was able to set a couple of properties right here in panel body style. And one of them was the color. So this is the color that I got back from ChatGPT. I could have also eyedroppered it, and I used that. The other thing I did was I constrained the width of the panel card to no more than 1,000 pixels. So if you're on a really, really wide screen, it's not going to look weird and all spread out, you know. So 1,000 it seemed to be pretty good. The next thing I did was I took our navigation buttons that were below the first name, last name, and all that, and I just scrolled them up here to the top. And I placed in the company name. So now the company name field is coming from this list control here, invoice header. And to insert that company name field, I just put in a field called company name by adding a control, a text box control. And then I went into the invoice header and I mapped it so that when I selected a particular company, that company name will appear in the field. This is how you do that mapping. So here we are in invoice header. And if you recall, invoice header has got a detail view, and in which you can set here in list properties, detail view. And then within the detail view, you can set up what's called a field map. In other words, which fields in the list should apply to fields that I've placed directly onto my UX. So I'm going to click here. Don't worry about those. And if you scroll down, you will see that I have mapped the company name. And so to do that, before I had mapped it, I just scrolled down to company name, clicked map field, and I selected the field that I want. And there it is. It's as simple as that. Okay. So that's how we got the company name field. But now the company name field, and for that matter, even the vendor invoice, are sort of like titles up at the top. And here, once again, I asked ChatGPT for the style to use, and it gave me this. I just simply copied and pasted it in. Here are some different font families. These are the ones that you fall back on if the originals aren't installed, as well as the color and the weight and the size. And I did the same thing here with company name as well. I just put it right here in its inline style. Now, if you recall, when you are styling things, you can either put things in a style or you can create what's known as a class and then just refer to that class. In this particular case, it didn't really make any difference because I only have one instance of company name and one instance of this static text. So it didn't make sense. I could just style it directly without building a class. But when we get down to another section, we do end up using classes, and I'm going to show you that here in a minute. Okay, let's pop back over into working preview and let's take a look at the next couple of elements that are on the screen. All right, so fill that in. You'll notice over here I have an order ID and an order date, and then over here in another column I have the ship date and I have the ship total. Okay, so how did I do that? I did that using what are called free-form controls. So a free-form control is basically an object that you can put in. I put them right next to each other. One's on the left and one's on the right. And you can specify whatever you want for your HTML here. So here I've put in order ID, that's the label. And then I've inserted a field, and that is the order ID from my list control. The nice thing about these freeform edit regions is you can insert these placeholders that get filled in. And if you're pulling them from a list, you can say insert list field, and then you can choose a list, and then you can choose which field you would like to insert right into that spot. Now, you're only going to see list fields here for lists that are hidden. And this is actually the same as well for placeholders. So freeform edit regions are a way for you to take controls that you've otherwise hidden in a UX and place them exactly where you want them to in a layout on your UX. So that's what we've done here. So here on the left, I have some fields, and here on the right, I have some fields. And if you'll notice, I also have some classes that I've referred to. One's called field label top, one's called field label bottom. Let me show you where you can define those classes. If you go into properties here and you just do a search for CSS, you're going to see something called local CSS definitions, and you click on that. And here are the three classes that I have defined. Field label top, there's its font family, size, weight, color, margin, so on. And also the field values. The field values are the data that's contained, and it's a little bit different in terms of color. Font is the same size, the weight's a little different. So now that I've defined those classes, I can use them multiple places just by referring back to them. Okay, there was another class in here, we're going to get to that in a minute, called list column header. So just remember that, because that one's a little bit different than the other two. We're going to go over here now back into controls. So that's how I put those here with the freeform edit regions. I was able to select my list control fields because my list here was hidden. Okay. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to get down into the list of details where we actually display the things that were ordered. Let me go ahead and show that to you again. Let's take a look here. Okay. So starting up here, you'll notice we have this blue column header. So it's a little bit different color. You'll also notice that we've assigned different fonts, weights, and things like that here. And we've inserted a new field here just for keeping track of item numbers. Let's start, though, by talking about adding in that blue color here up at the top. To do that, there is no actual direct way, at least that I can find within the detail section, to set that. But that's not a problem, because when I'm in working preview, what I can do is I can find what class that element has been assigned to, and I can modify that class so that I can do something like, for example, change the background color to blue. So I'll do that by opening the Chrome debugger. And when that appears, I can use my little selector tool, click that up here, and I can choose this whole row. And you could see right up here, it says, if you look in fact, I'm going to click on it, which makes it disappear. So we'll say open Chrome debugger. Let's take a look at that exact row that it's in. You'll see that there is a class called list call header. It's also, you can also see it when you select it. Oops, when you highlight over it, you can see it as the last part of the name for the div list call header. So all I did was I copied out that list call header. I went back into properties and into my CSS, and I pasted in list call header, and I said it's got a background color of this blue color that I got from ChatGPT. Now, list call header is already defined in a style sheet. But because this is a cascading style sheet, CSS, right? This is where it actually cascades. Because when we put a local definition for something like this column header, it's going to use the local definition. So it's going to just overwrite whatever was there by default. And so that's how we got in our blue color, by finding the style, adding it to our style sheet, and changing the color. All right, that was pretty easy. Let's go back into controls. And before I forget, let's go back up into here into freeform, say freeform 2. You'll notice in here, I have got a date field and I have got a total field. If you were to look at these in the database, sometimes those totals are weird and they've got a whole bunch of, they're either missing a a decimal separator at the end, or it's got multiple, or it has got more than 2 decimals at the end. And we wanted to format that. The same with the date. The date had a date and time, which is stored in the database, but I'm only interested in seeing that date portion. So what I can do is I can pre-format those fields before they even show up in here. And I do that in invoice header, which is the list control, which is the source of those fields. So here I am back here in list invoice header, and I'm going to go down into into fields. And I'm going to choose, for example, ship date, which is one of the ones that I use. And then you'll see down here, there is something called display format, and it uses this sort of funky syntax. There's a builder for this. All you need to do is click on next to it and say, select predefined format, and you can choose from any one of these date formats here. You can also create your own date format if you like. And so I did that for the date, but I also did that for the total, which is here, this total amount, total due. And I had it put in a currency symbol for me and limit it to 2 decimal places at the end. Again, this was a predefined format that I selected. And when I set it up in this way in the list, when I place it into that HTML freeform editor, it's going to be edited. It's going to be displayed the way that I would like it. All right, where were we? We were back here in the list control, if I recall, for items. And here in the list control, you'll notice that I have a new column here, which shows you the item numbers. So we can do this very easily in Alpha Anywhere, because when you're setting up a list control, one of the fields you can choose is actually not a real list from your database, but it's a logical field that we give you. So if you go into list layout, this is where we actually list out the fields, you'll see, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong list control. Let's go into details where it lives. I go into list layout, and you'll see that along with the fields that I've queried from my database, I also have logical row number, which starts at 1, zero-based row number, which is sort of how it works behind the scenes. So your first thing would be 0. And then row key number, which I think looks pretty similar to this one. Actually, I forget what this one is for, to be honest with you. But the one we really want here is logical row number. So I put that in. Now, for each of the fields in our list, in our items list, we have 2 things that we can set. We can set the style. Let me click it up here. We can set the style of the heading. And again, I just asked ChatGPT, could you give me the CSS for that? And here we've got like a somewhat bold, Helvetica, right aligned heading. And then we can also set the style for the data. We can do that here. Blank, 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 blank. Now, an alternate way, I wouldn't suggest it because this isn't too hard, but an alternate way to do it is we could have created a class, and then we could have used our inspection tool in Chrome and seen how our data is labeled, because there is a style for that. And then we could have gone back into our local style sheet and overwritten that. But there are only a couple fields, so it was just as easy to do these as inline styles for each one of these. You'll notice name is a little bit different because it's the color green has been inserted in there. The unit price, order, and then finally line total. All right, so if we go take a look here at working preview. There's only one final thing needed to put on our, there's only one final thing we needed to add, and that was our total, which is right here at the end. So not surprisingly, I did that also as a freeform control. And the freeform control, I just again asked ChatGPT, can I have the style for how that should look? I pasted that in, and then where it came to where the actual number is supposed to be, again, I just inserted it from my list field over there. All right, so let me take a look and see if I've covered what I wanted to today. We talked about how you can map a field from a list control. Oops, cancel that. I'll save it, why not? how you can map a field from a list control, how you can hide a control like we did in the case of our list, and how hidden controls will appear when you're using free-form layouts. That's the only time they'll appear as placeholders for you. Showed you how to adjust the number and the date format, and how to edit the local style sheet so that you can both define your own styles, but you can also, more importantly, overwrite styles that are in the alpha style sheet. Showed you how to come up with that logical row number. And the only other thing I wanted to show you was how to space things in a, because this is a great little feature, how to space things in a list control box like we have here. So for example, I didn't need as much room, say, for price, quantity, and extension as I did for the name of the product. But I didn't want to specify that in terms of absolute pixels. In fact, I didn't even want to bother calculating percentages. Instead, I did that using flex units, which is this great thing that you can use. So here in details, when I'm on that list properties, when I'm on list layout, each one of these fields has got a width associated with it. So width of 1 is just a relative term compared to the other widths here. So if product ID has got a width of 1, then and name has got, say, a width of flex 3, that just means make it 3 times bigger than what you did for product ID. And that's just that's the way that it's set up here in the list control. So I think I've covered almost all of the common questions I get about styling. Let's see if there are any more from you, and let's also see if there are any other questions here. So let's take a look. Looks good. It says I have, oops. The grid is one table. Okay, there's a question called, I have a grid with multiple tables. Is it possible to adjust the color of the column quantity for item X if X is in the pull these table? I'm not sure I understand that one. That one you might want to write in with if you don't mind. Again, you can always send questions to guides, guides@alphasoftware.com. Someone says you always have to click one of the arrows to get a record to appear. How do you get it to automatically start from the first row? You know what? I didn't bother to figure that out, but let's see if we can take a look at that right now. I would probably want to do that as an action, a client-side action. And I would say after the dialog box has been rendered, so on, oh, there's so many. On render complete, I would want to insert, let's do an action JavaScript. Create, edit, action JavaScript, and a new action. We're going to call this load first record. Right, edit that. And I think there's going to be a list control action for that. List control actions, action name, refresh row. Yeah, there's a bunch of them. Navigate, fetch more, navigate. So we're going to say navigate on the invoice header to the first record. And let's navigate to first. So now I've built an action JavaScript whose job is to do that. I can save that. Okay. And while I've built that, I now need to actually run that when the render is complete. So I'm going to say insert. Again, I haven't done this. This will be very exciting to see whether or not this works, but we'll insert, action JavaScript, insert code to run action JavaScript. We're going to run that thing that we just built. I'm going to save that. Save. Go to working preview. Huh. I would have thought that would have worked. Did I choose the wrong table? That's what happens when I do this stuff live. Okay. Yeah, it should be definitely the invoice header table. That's what I want. I want it to fetch the first record. Oh, that is weird. Maybe next. Set the next. Save. 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 If that doesn't work, you'll learn the answer next week, I guess. I'm not sure that. I think I had to hit. Let's reload that. And then we'll give it a second. Huh. I'm not sure why that didn't work, but I can find out the answer for you. If you need to know ahead of time, send an email to guides, guides@alphasoftware.com. Might need a more short timeout. Yeah, that is true. I might need a short timeout before that's run. Just out of curiosity, because I'm here, why don't we just throw a button on here that runs that? Stick a big button on here. Control button. And this is going to be called load first record. And we'll make it the first one. And I'm going to set the on submit event to, add new action. Action. One action. My action's name is load first record. I think that's all I should need. And let's take a look. We'll go into working preview. And then if I push that button and it does work, then it probably does mean that I needed a little bit of a delay. Interesting. I don't know. I will work it out for next time. Always something. It could also be, someone said it could be a different client event. Yeah, but it doesn't look like this loads the first one anyway, though. Oh, does it? Okay, so I'm going to switch. I'm going to click load first. Oh, that is the first one, though, I think. Yeah, that's the last one. Load first. Nope, sorry. Let's see, are there any other questions here? Doesn't look like it. Wonderful. So we're going to have a special guest next week. If you guys join us, from Strut Software, they're going to be talking again about AI, but they've done something really cool where they're using AI to, well, maybe I shouldn't tell you. Well, all right, to build UX controls, something I think has got to be seen to be believed. In the meantime, if you have any other further questions, send them over to guides, GUIDES @alphasoftware.com, and we will be happy to answer them. Thanks very much, everyone, for showing up today. Hope to see you at our next Wednesday webinar. Take care. Bye-bye.